All right. Booting up. Boot, 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 boot. All right. Hello, everyone. KC here for Tuesday's Hobby Painting Chat Day. Hope everyone had a great weekend. And first couple days rolling into the week, it's Tuesday. Time to do some painting. So, what I have here today is a hill giant. I think it's a hill giant. From Reaper Miniatures. It's from their Bone line, the Bone Miniatures line. Turn down my music a bit. He doesn't come on a base, so I attached him to some slate rock and attached it to a base, which is taped to my paint handle here, which is just a cap of a spray can. I've already primed him black. He's rather glossy because I use Vallejo black primer. So he's got a bit of a shine to him compared to the Badger Steinlerez, which leaves a nice flat finish. This is Araman, which I'll be working on soon too. Just have him off to the side. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to do some pre-highlighting with the zenithal primer. So we have the black, and then we're going to add some gray, and then at the very top some white. And we're going to work on the skin. And he's got some other bits and bobs here. He's got some armor, some fur, and a leather tunic. Excuse me. He's got a big old tree to bash you with. And he's got, like I said, some armor bits. So let's go ahead and get to work. So we'll go ahead and turn on my airbrush. That's why I got the handy dandy rubber glove here. I know I could use regular paint, but I'm just trying to use up some of this primer. So I mainly prime in black, but I got these in a set when I won the airbrush here. I just add a little bit of flow improver to help keep from the needle needle dry. Need to make sure my needle is all the way forward. When I store it, I loosen the nut here and I pull the needle back to help protect it. I just need to remember to put it back where it was. Alright, so we got some Steinlerez gray. This is a primer, but I'm just trying to use it as a regular paint. Don't need a whole lot in there. Alright, grab my mixing brush here because of that flow improver in there. So we're going to get the majority of the work done on this giant or troll. I'm going to call it a giant. I think it's a hill giant if I remember the packaging right. And I just use an old plastic card that tests the strain of the airbrush, make sure it's coming out good. So with zenithal priming, or the majority of priming. Hey, Crikeus. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct. How you doing? You want to work on some hill giant here. How you doing today? Or early day? I'm not sure what time difference it is for you, but thanks for joining. So when I do a zenithal priming, it's usually from the top and like a 45-degree angle around. But we're going to get make sure we keep the dark black in the shadows. So what's really nice with the airbrush is I can control where I'm applying the highlights. And how bright and sharp I want to keep them. So it's mainly down at a 45, at an angle like this. But I'm not spraying straight down. Like right here, I'm catching the top of his bicep, and then down here on his arm, making sure that it's dark right here. And I can add a little bit more to build up those highlights with the gray. And then the white is just the more bright points. You can still do this with a rattle can, like a spray can, but the problem with that is you don't really have control of how much comes out of that spray can. So it's nice with having the airbrush. Put it on his belly here. I'm going to have to do a little bit more. It seems the Vallejo primers, I got like 2 big bottles of it, so I thought, oh, let's use it up. It's really glossy, so the Stynylorez will cut down that gloss so it won't be too shiny on the camera. So I'm just using this to catch the highlights, the upper areas of the muscles. He's really buff, so it's a lot of nice areas to build highlights and shadows. And we'll get some of his log club here he's got. Now I'm going to go back over this with my base coats and actual colors. So why I'm doing this with the gray and white is to make those areas brighter even with the regular paint. And then the black and the shadows will be darker. So it's that underpainting idea. So the majority... Well, hello again. Hopefully he'll hold on to you this time. So welcome back. And thank you for the subscription, Crikeus. Welcome. Really do appreciate it. Alan Menace. Great name. Alan Menace, hello. How are you doing tonight? Welcome. I'm just doing some pre-highlighting with the airbrush here on this Hill Giant from Reaper Miniatures. Get down here. Alright. He's starting to look really good. I'm building up the highlights with the gray, so the more I apply, the brighter it's going to be. And then the final highlights will be with the white. Yes, I do. It's just kind of easier to show it on the camera with the big guy. I have Ahriman here from Warhammer 40,000 that I'm going to be doing the same thing with. He's a little bit bigger, so I'll be showing that off too. I've even done it with really small ones too, so. I used to do the same technique with a rattle can. Airbrush! Hey, Dreamer! How you doing tonight? I used to do this technique with rattle cans, you know, spray cans, but it was mainly prime it black and then do a 45-degree angle with gray, keeping the black underneath, and then at the very top do a small little bit of white. But up here in Minnesota, it gets really cold. He's landing soon, huh? Is he coming through the roof? Make sure there's a lot of padding for him to land on. For them to land on. I find with the airbrush I have more control of where I want the highlights to be from this. Oh, I see. He'll come in and just crash everything. Yeah, bad for the knees. Completely. But, like I say, with rattle cans, spray cans, it's hard to do it here in Minnesota because of the cold. So I find it's actually pretty good having the airbrush. It's not dispersing a lot to where I have like a haze in the room. So I have the where my room where I'm painting is in the back bedroom, and next to the bedroom is bathroom, and it has an air fan, and so I have a fan running. All right, so there's the gray. Turned out pretty cool. So we'll set him aside real quick, and we'll do some of this Ahriman here to just use up what I have in here. Trolling ya? No, I think he's a giant. If I remember correctly, he's a giant, not a troll. I don't have the little card anymore. I have to look it up on the website. Yeah, he might be a hill troll. I think that's what it was. The giants are bigger. Or maybe he's just a tiny giant. He's a half giant. Maybe he's a half giant. Don't make fun of my size. I have a little bit left of the gray in here, so we'll finish this off real quick. Yeah, this model is going to be real fun to paint. Be a lot of bright blues and stuff. So he's got like this very bright magical effect, cloud effect coming off his hand here. So I want to make that brighter than anything else. Let's see if I can get my finger in here. I don't want underneath it to be. There we go. Not so much, because we want to keep more of the shading down in the recesses here on his cloak. on the back of his cape here. Just starting to run out. Alright, so we'll set him aside. There's not a whole lot in there. So we'll do a quick little rinse out. Of the gray here. To get the majority of it out, because I want to have that white. Just using an old beat up brush. Alright, so what I have in this container here, it's about a tenth of the bottle with some isotope alcohol, about I think 91%, 75, 91%, something like that. And then the rest is just water. You can also use this Medea airbrush cleaner, is what I use. Same idea, but I still cut it with water. So with this, I'll put that about a tenth of the way, and then fill the rest up with water. And just having a old mug that I dump the water in, or dump the paint in. There's some primer dried up on the side, which happens. Make sure that is off. It's out of there before I switch to my other colors, because I don't want it to have a hint of gray. So I'll just flush it out. Alien Menace. Okay, I read your name wrong. I thought it was Alan. Hello, Alien Menace. Welcome. Thank you for the follow. Welcome everyone. My name is Casey. This is Tuesday Hobby Paint and Chat night. Usually what I do on my Twitch stream is I'll just hang out, do some painting, chat with some people, answer questions. If you have any questions on painting, on miniature painting, feel free to pop those in the chat. If you're new to painting, welcome. Feel free to ask any question. I will do the best I can to answer them. So I'm just cleaning out my airbrush real quick here. And I still have some of that residue of that gray in the bottom. It's being real pain in the butt. So let's check here. Spray out that. Make sure I don't have any gray up in the needle coming out. Sometimes you'll get paint built up on the needle here. So you just use your fingernails to pull that off. I also have this little thing here, spray pad or spray jar. I don't have to worry about the fumes coming out of it. It's got a nice handle. I mainly use it to hold my airbrush. but you can just spray the cleaner in there or excess paint, and it just comes into the container, and then you just dump it later. It's got a filter here. Just spraying it on the towel and make sure it's clean. I forgot to grab this. And this right here, the smaller one I have here, is just pure water. So I use that to spray out any cleaner. You can use this like alcohol mixture I have to thin your paints if you want, but certain paints react strangely to the alcohol. I know scale 75, the scale colors from scale 75, these are the fantasy and game colors, they do not react. They react very strangely to alcohol. It like gums up and everything. So you can just use regular water to thin it. What I use for my thinners, I have the Vallejo airbrush flow improver. This just helps the tip, the needle, from drying up as much. And then I have Vallejo airbrush thinner. I always add a drop of the flow improver in there to help kind of lubricate the needle in a sense before I to the paint. It just helps it from drying on the needle fast. Alright, so we're done with the gray. Let's use some white. Stein Lorez by Badger. Great primers. I don't need a whole lot in there. Actually, I probably put too much in there. But that's alright. Do a quick little stir with my brush here. And I always use a plastic card or an old business card to check the spray of the airbrush when I mix it. Make sure it's, if I need to add more thinner or if I need to add more paint, things like that. It's better to do an offshoot and test it before you start working on your model. So, sometimes you can spray it on your thumb here. Alright, so this, we're just going to do the upper portions of it with the white. Just gradually add that highlight. So I'm just slowly, so if you're not sure how an airbrush works, you press down the trigger, that lets the air out, and then you pull back on the trigger and that lets the paint come through. White is well known for, because of the thickness of it sometimes, of clogging up or giving you dry tip. That's what they call it with professional people, the needle tip. So you want to add maybe a little bit more flow improver and some thinner if needed, even if it's a primer, or an airbrush paint, pretty thin. I always add thinner and just like normal. So with the white, I just want to concentrate, the majority of the area is going to be his face, top of his muscles here, because they're a little bit higher up than his head, up here on his knuckles, some bits on the tree trunk, and then down here in front, just a little bit. So it's not a whole lot. The majority of the highlight we got was with the gray. So I'm just gently pulling back on the trigger just to get a small little bit of paint coming out. See? It's really starting to gunk up on the tip here. And that's just white. White does that. Sometimes every once in a while I'll pull off to the side and, you know, spray into my paper towel or onto my thumb here to help ungunk it. That's a technical term, ungunk. So you can do the same process of building up your highlights with, you know, other colors. But I wanted to show how with the zenithal priming. So if I wanted to, over the black, I could do a dark, or even have a dark brown, and then building up the highlights over that. You can do the same process with your regular paint. And the best way to figure out where your light's trying to shine is show it underneath your lamp. So everywhere it's brighter on it. I don't have a pure black one over here. I got kind of one. He's got a bit of gray, but he's a little bit easier. So this is just a 3D print of an orc that a friend of mine did. And he's been primed black. You can see underneath. And I just started spraying some gray on him. So if you hold up to your lamp and kind of tilt it, you can see that it's already bright up on top, and then you can see the shadows underneath from the 3D, from the three-dimensional of the model. So what I do is I just spray where I see the light shining the brightest. That's the same thing when you're doing highlights with your regular paintbrush. So it's a great way to figure out where to place lights. Now that's if you want the highlight all to be prominent from like the 12 o'clock sun, high noon. But if you want it at an angle, all you would do is just put it at, just rotate the model how much you want it. So let's say we want more light coming down here at this angle. I would spray it this way. Like so. But the light is actually going to reflect off of the ground, so it's going to kind of bounce back up here, but it won't be as prominent as direct sunlight here. So you can just come back and do just a light spray highlighting. Like so. So it's still bright at his face at this angle, but we have some light coming back here. It's not completely in shadow. It's not like it's more directed, like let's say he has a fire. He's holding up like a torch. So that would be a bit brighter here, and it would have some light reflected back, but it would still kind of be more dark. Or if you want to show that, where he's in pitch black and all that, the light is coming from his torch here. So you can just concentrate it here at this area, and it'd be darker on this side. Alright, so let's continue back to our troll here. So he's got the leg muscles here jutting out, so they'll catch some light. So it's a lot of going back and forth and just double checking. Alright, so there he is in grayscale. We'll get it right here on his chin. So he's ready for some paints on him. So we'll go ahead and use up the rest of this, some more of this white. Like I said, he's got a little bit of a magic strand coming off his hand here, so I want that a little bit, be a bit brighter. Oops. So we're keeping the majority of the highlights near the top. Ah. This white's being a real pain in the butt. It's clogging up my airbrush a bit. Oops. Too much there, but that's okay. That'll work out. So he's got some more bright parts, so we're going to try to blend that in. Do some lighter of the white around those bright points to help tie it in. Yeah, because this knee, it's really sticking out, so that's alright. So down here, I'm not worried about adding any color underneath the cloak here. It's got some color from the gray, but it doesn't need any of the white. Alright, so we'll set him aside, and I'll work on him at a later date. So let's go ahead and clean this out. Alright, Griever. Safe travels. Be careful out there, all that ice and such. We'll talk to you soon. Making sure it gets all clean in there. Nice and clean. It's like this back part of the cup seems to dry up. As you can see, the outside is pretty built up with paint. It doesn't stop me from being able to airbrush. As long as this is clean, the tip is clean and the needle is clean and there's no paint back in here, it's all good. So what I do is I will pull the nozzle back. Hopefully you can, I'm not sure if you can see this. And that retracts the needle. And I just clean that tip. Make sure there's no paint dried up. And then at the end of my paint session with the airbrush, I'll actually remove the needle and clean that off real nice and clean. Nice and clean. Alright, so we'll go spritz of water to help clean out any of that. Oops. The cleaning solution. Alright. Yeah, it's time for some coffee. Alright. So now we're going to add some color to him. He's looking quite ready for black and white horror movie. He's ready for that. And the reason why I did all of this is the brighter points that are under white, that's going to make the colors much brighter. And the dark black or gray is going to make them much darker. So doing this in the priming stage or the underpainting stage prepares where I'm going to have brighter colors, and it'll help make, even if I apply one coat of the same color from on here on his arm, this area, even though I haven't done any highlight or shading, this area will be brighter than it is down here, just because of what's underneath the paint. The paint is somewhat transparent, so it's showing the underneath paint through. So getting your models like this, it does make it easier to paint over than just a solid base coat, solid primer. Also, if you just paint over black, your colors are going to be really dark. Depending on the paint line, they might not cover very well, so you have to do multiple layers of color. Like, let's say we want to do a bright skin tone. Well, if I try doing that over black, it's going to take me multiple passes with that color. So if I have like a gray or a white, they'll be much brighter, but my shading and recessed areas will also be very bright. So doing the combination of, best of both worlds sense, where I have the black and all the shading and all the shadows, recessed areas, and then a lighter color at all the high points, and then a very bright highlight at the uppermost areas. That gives me the best of both worlds, where it will be, even with the same base coat color, it'll be darker because of the undercoat of the black, going up to a brighter color. Hopefully that makes sense. And people don't think, what is he doing? What's he talking about? Alright. Let's get my paint colors here ready. So I just use plastic cups to mix my paint in. You can mix them into the hopper. Sometimes I do that to speed it up, but I like to use the cups and then just pour it into the airbrush cup. That way I can figure out if I need to thin it more or add more paint. It's easier to do it here and then pour it in there than trying to readjust it inside this. And here I can make, if I think I'm going to need a lot, I can make a large amount here and just keep adding more and more into that. Alright, so all the paints I'm using are Pro Acryl from Monument and Creature Caster. So we're going to have some tan flesh. It's a nice mid-tone flesh. But he's a hill giant and he's slightly tanned. So we're going to add some light umber, which is a lighter brown tone for our base coat. Making sure there's no gunk in here. Alright. These paints are really great for the airbrush. You don't need to thin them too much, and they just apply on the area silky smooth. Very nice. Oh, I shook it too much. There she blows. Seven, 8. Do about 8. See what's with that. Kind of have an idea of how much I'm applying in here. So we'll do about roughly half and half, 1-to-1 between the two colors. Add a couple drops of thinner just to help it flow better. Same with some flow improver. The Badger airbrush, the Badger Patriot 105 that I use, it's a great workhorse airbrush. You can pretty much put anything in here and it'll spray through well. Even if you don't thin it properly, it'll still work really good. It's easy to work with, easy to clean, easy to get replacement parts if needed. I won this at a convention last year at the Renegade Open here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, for winning top marks in a painting contest. So Ken from Badger was there, and he's like, here, and he gives me the Patriot plus 3 Badger, the Steinlerez sets, this black, white, and black, gray, and white primers with it. So it was very nice. There's the other. I also bought a kind of beginner airbrush. Oh, there's the nozzle. This is a Masters airbrush. This is a very nice one to work with, to get started with. It's not too expensive. I got to clean that out a little bit better. It might have a little bit bigger of a cup than the Badger, but it works really well. You can get it with a compressor, tank compressor, for $70 or $80 on Amazon. Comes with a hose and everything, so it's actually really nice. So it's not too expensive to get into airbrushing. I learned with the master, and then I won that Badger airbrush. I was like, oh, cool. So it's nice. Alright. So that's a nice tan skin tone. So when you're thinning your paint, I tend to, it's kind of hard to see it on the camera, I'll pull it up against the side of the cup, and if it flows back down quite easily, then it's a nice consistency. Also, I just use an old brush, and I'll press the paint, and if I can see the bristles coming through, it's at the right consistency. But I'm going to add a little bit more paint and a little bit more thinner. Just a little bit, not too much, because it's working really well. What's up with you? This new these Pro Acryl bottles are really great. It's got a twist top like a glue. It's like white Elmer's glue. You just twist it, drop out how much paint you want, and then twist it back, and you're ready to go. Don't have to deal with taking the cap off. Don't need to worry about taking the cap off and getting paint stuck up in the like Vallejos. Normally you have to twist off the top, drop it out, but you get paint in the end of the cap, and that can dry and catch on the tip, and you pull and the tip can come off. Very nice added feature. A bit more thinner. So it's kind of a going back and forth when you're mixing paint. That should work. There we go. That'll work. I don't like to say, 2 parts of this, 2 parts to that, because where I live is much different than where you are. Your conditioning of where you're painting. Need to turn back on my compressor. There we go. Forgot I turned it off. Trying to spray and I have no air coming through. Alright, see how that's coming out nice and smooth. Perfect. Just small controlled bursts. You just gently pull back on the trigger to let some paint out. I'm also doing it at an angle, just like I did with the priming and the white. So I'm doing the same with this, where I'm getting the more paint on the ends than on the shadow. So it's still got that bit of shade in there. And this hill troll's got some hair here on his forearms and on his back of his hand here. So we don't need to add the skin to that tone. So rotate the model around. Don't rotate the airbrush because you don't want to spill your paint out. So just going around the same area where all the skin will be. Concentrating more on the upper raised areas of the muscles. Just adding a hint of color in here and this shading. So I'm going to go in there with a darker shade of so just a light dusting here under his arm. So I'm also still doing the zenithal, where I'm applying more paint at the raised areas than underneath it, but I'm giving it a light dusting to just to show that that is the skin. Alright. So we'll go ahead and clean out the small little bits that's left. Sorry, I'm setting it onto the table and it's shaking the table, which is shaking the camera. Alright, so I'm not going to do a full cleaning right now. So I want to keep some of that skin tone in there. And that'll help with the shading, because the shading, I'm adding darker colors to the base coat of the skin. So make our skin tone again. And I don't need to worry if I have to change the drops. I know I'm doing about a 50-50, so I'll do the same amount of colors with these. So like 3 of the tan flesh and 3 of the light umber will still give me that same tone. Real easy to mix. This is a little bit lighter. So we'll add another drop of the umber. Drops of the thinner. Alright, so for the shading, I'm going to add to the shading for now. I add some mahogany, which is a red-brown tone. Just enough to darken it. So about a 2. And we'll see what that gives us. Alright, so this right here, that's my base coat. So it's not dark enough. So I'll add a little bit more of mahogany in there. So it's actually going to be a one to one. You know, 1 part tan flesh, 1 part light umber, 1 part mahogany. Alright. We'll add some purple. Just regular purple. But we're not going to do too much because this is a strong color, so we'll just... I'm just playing with colors, seeing what works. It gives me a slight coloration, but it's not as dark as I want. So I'll add some camo green to kind of cut back on that reddish tint. If the bottles... Like I said, I'm just playing with color and see what happens. There we go. Yeah, I think it was just too red. So adding that camo green cuts, you know, kind of cuts the red and makes it look a little bit more natural. Add some more flow improver. So we want it a little bit more thin. Let's see if this, or if I just made the same color. Yeah, it's not dark enough. You silly sidewinder. Alright, let's go ahead and add some red. We'll add some dark red, burnt red. Add some dark gray blue. That'll definitely make it a bit darker. I'll make it like almost a purple tint. There we go. That's what we want. We eventually get to where we want to go. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than normal. Alright. There we go. So now we're going to flip on the underside. just spray underneath. Like so. Just gently applying the paint so I have more concentration on it. Spraying his mouth there. So if I gently just pull back on the trigger, I can get us a very fine point spray. A little easier to control. So where the black is from my pre-shading and highlighting, I'm just following that as a guide to apply this color. So here I am going to cover up where the fur is to start making that darker. Not fur, he's got hair. So just underneath the muscles to give it that that shading. There, I did a little bit too much and it kind of spidered, sprayed out a bit. That's okay, because I can touch that up with the brush. Because this isn't all, I'm going to do this all with the airbrush. After I get the majority of it done with the airbrush, I'm going to go back with the regular brush and touch up all the things I need to do and complete it. So the airbrush is just an added tool of what I want to do with painting. It's not a necessity, but it does help. It is a nice addition to have. I'm no expert with it. I'm still learning with it, but I'm at the point where I'm very comfortable with what I have learned. That I can work with it and show off and talk about it. So right in here, his legs, I stayed with the black and the dark gray. So I'm keeping the black up and underneath his legs because that's pure shadow. Getting in between his toenails here. And you can see already he's got some color to him with just the base coat of the color of the skin and then adding some shading to it. So around his leg where it's connected to where he's got his fur tunic or loincloth, we should say. So at this point, I'm now covering up the black that I did from the primer with this color, using that as a guide, and only leaving the black in the deepest recesses. And I'm going to add another darker shading here. Add some more of that dark gray blue, some dark red. Just doing a quick overview to see if I missed anything. It's not clay. It's not clay. It's a miniature. He's made from like a plastic. This is a hill troll from Reaper Miniatures. It's part of their Reaper bone lines. And I'm just adding color with the airbrush. Welcome to the stream. Tenno Freak. Welcome. Yeah, he kind of looks like it's clay. Thank you. Yeah, it does take a while to get used to it, but once you get the hang of it, it's so easy. And it's such a great tool to have. And especially on these big models, it doesn't take much. It's a great assist, because I've been working on him for about an hour, and I did the pre-shading with the airbrush and the primer. That's that black and white. Then added a base coat skin, and then starting to put in some shading. So right now he's looking really good. Yeah, you can do both. You can work from the shadow up, or you can work from a mid-tone, add shading, and then add highlighting. Thank you. Yeah, Alien. You can go from dark to light, light to dark, or mid-tone, where you put you have what I'm doing here is I have my mid-tone, adding the shadow, like 2 down of shading, and then like 2 up with the highlights. Tenno Freak, thank you for the follow. Welcome. But yeah, you can do it either way. There's no right or wrong way to paint. So all right, so we're gonna add some more darker colors. All right, flush this out real quick. Because I'm still using the same general colors. It's alright if I have some residue here in my airbrush container. I just want to make sure there's no dried paint, because the dried paint will get down onto the needle and it will clog it up. Alright. Trying to figure out what colors I want. Alright. So for this net shading, we'll do some Maybe I'll add some dark umber. So these are the colors I'm thinking of for the net shading. Be really dark. But your skin tone, it's not just a pale, a skin peachy tone or tan tone or whatever. It's got blues and purples and reds in it from the blood flow. As you can see on my wrist, you can see this purple vein, one of the main veins going through my skin, and even at my palm, you can see that. That's just from the blood flowing underneath the skin. It's very translucent. So adding that to your models, adding into the shading the purples and the blues, things like that, makes it look more natural, more lifelike in that sense for a giant hill troll. It is based in fantasy, but we want it to look somewhat naturalistic, thing along those lines. Because people will look at it as like, oh yeah, that looks like it could walk around. Even if it's a blue troll or a green skin orc, you still want to add those purples and blues into the shading and add it to the skin tone to give it that natural, lifelike appearance. So this is the last shading, somewhat. So I'm just trying to keep adding to this. So we'll start with a few drops of dark gray blue. We'll add some red. Now this I don't need a whole lot, and this is going to go, I'm going to use the airbrush to pinpoint into the very deep recesses. So this part right here that I did recently, I'm going to go roughly about half of that down. So I have the base coat, so I did half of that with my first shading, half of that area with the shading, and now I'm going to do half of that with the dark shading. And then as the highlights, it'd be the opposite, where I'll go half of that with a light color, and then at the very point, brighter. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Don't feel like you'll be interrupting me. That's all right. I'm here to answer questions about miniature painting, things like that, airbrushing. I'm just going to add a little bit of umber. Actually, let me see how my color is now that I've added those. Oh yeah. See, now this is just making a nice purple tone, bluish purple. Glad I mixed it up before I added that umber. That would have made it really dark. That is perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And if I want to go even further after applying this, I could add the umber or some black. You don't want to use black as a shade color because it will cancel out all the color. And you don't want to use white as your highlights because it will be too bright. So if you use like dark browns, dark purple, a dark blue-gray for your shading. I've been painting since early 90s, like 91, 92. So I think that's 25 plus years. So yeah, I've been painting for a while. It was a hobby. I just enjoy painting. Not so much for the gaming because I didn't have a whole lot of people to game with, but I just enjoyed painting, and I just kept kept working at it. I am a full-time commission painter. I've been doing that for just over 2 years, and started. Let me turn off my compressor. It starts to get loud. I have been doing streaming for. Yeah, I'm an old timer, old painter. I've been doing the stream the Twitch streaming for about 3 months, give or take. It was like early, I think it was like September that I started doing the Twitch streaming and working on making videos for Patreon. I do have a Patreon page. I'm adding more to it, and I have videos up on YouTube. I post all my stuff on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Things down, links are down below. So, all right. So I'm liking that color. Let's add some thinner to it, just to help it flow better. Yeah, and I think I was even painting. I started painting late 80s, like 88, 89, I think, or 90. 1990. Alright, so we don't need a whole lot. It's just at the bottom of the well there. And so it's a little bit darker purple, like a brown purple tone. So we're just using the airbrush, same thing, just in a smaller area. As I was talking about with the black, I can add some black just to really darken that up for the deep shading. But it's always easier. It'll look better adding like dark browns, dark blue, grays, purples, things like that for your shading. I don't need a whole lot of this color, so I'm just going into some of the deep shadows here. Helps if I turn my compressor back on. That's probably why it's not working right. There we go. It's all live, people. Part of the show. I've only been airbrushing for less than a year. I started doing it before, but I got frustrated with it, and then I came back and it kind of all clicked in my head. It's like, oh, this is how you do it. Talking to other painters who use the airbrush, things like that. So I got to a point, it's like, you know what, I'm comfortable with this, to explain how I'm doing it, and hopefully that will help other painters. It's almost 7. So he's got a lot of musculature, a lot of nice sculpting here, where it's just he's really bulked up. I guess you have to be carrying around a big old tree trunk there. So I'm adding some darker around his head. That way it's darker in the recesses, and then it'll be brighter at the front of his face. So if you look at me and my camera, behind me it's really dark, so the light's coming right on my forehead. That's exactly how I'm going to be doing this with his head. So it's going to be really bright here, but it'll be dark shadow, so that'll help bring it forward and make that the center point of the model. time's starting to run out. Alright. I'm happy with the way that is. Do some. Alright, his eyes here. Up in his mouth. Alright. So, we're done with that. Set him aside. We'll clean this out real good. And we'll start adding some highlights. And we'll do that with the airbrush too. Just we'll make the base coat, add a little bit of lighter color, like an ivory, instead of a white. And we'll just kind of do some small spots to bring that up, to brighten it up. And then we'll switch to our regular brush. So I really want to make sure I get this nice and clean because I don't want any of that dark color for the highlighting. So I just spray it on a paper towel, make sure it's clean. Out the excess here. All right. We're going to switch to another cup. Oh, missed this right here, but I can go in there with a paintbrush and paint that up. But he's looking pretty gruesome. He's looking pretty cool. Reorganizing my paint up here so I know where things are at. Keep it kind of neat while I'm painting. I try to keep it organized. Doesn't always happen. Alright, we're just gonna go ahead and fill it in top here. So I don't need a whole lot. So about half and half of this color and half and half of this one. So that's pretty much our base coat. I'm going to add a little bit more of the tan flesh for the first highlight. We'll add some thinner in here. Flow improver. So this isn't exactly what I'm doing with the airbrush. Once I do the highlights with the airbrush, the skin's not done. It's going to be to a point where I'm happy with, that I can start working on the other areas. And if needed, I can go back and touch up and add more highlights, more shading with the brush. This gets just, it's a starting, jumping off point. Give me an idea of how the colors look. Make sure I close these. Alright, so this is a little bit lighter. I don't want to go too bright with the first highlight. I slowly add more of a brighter color to gradually build up those highlights. Alright, so that's somewhat of the base coat. Here's the deep shadows, so you can see the gradual going from very dark up to a light color. So I'm just gently pulling back for some paint. On the forehead there. So now I'm fixing that mistake I did, that overspray with the shading. Some water still in it. It's very watery. Just gotta be careful. So I'm just catching the very raised areas with the airbrush. Same thing that I would do with a brush, but I'm speeding up the process. Getting some nice smooth blends. And it's just speeding up the process of it. The airbrush isn't a magic tool. You know, you pick up an airbrush and all of a sudden all your painting will be much better. It does take practice. And just like when you're learning to paint, you know, practice, practice, practice. Just keep going at it, trying different things. To be honest, this is the first time I've done this to this degree with an airbrush. Usually I just do the base coat and that's it. So. That's why I really like working with these larger models. Because you can really just go to town and have fun experimenting different ways of painting them up. So this is just a regular like kind of Caucasian tan skin, but you can do the same thing, you know, using some of the same colors for the shading. It's just your base coat will be a different color. Say if I was doing an orc, instead of having that base coat of the tan flesh, it would just be some olive green with tan flesh. Because adding a flesh tone into, like, for an orc makes it look more natural. If you're doing like a blue troll, I would do this kind of a dark gray blue color, and adding that skin tone makes it a little bit more natural looking for a blue skin creature. So this guy almost looks like a Sasquatch, like a Bigfoot type character. So. So now, even though I applied this color on here, applying another layer in a smaller, working up towards this raised area, building up that color, even with the same paint, I can build up a highlight because it's, like I said, very thin layers building up like a tile roof or a pyramid. If the paint will work for me. There we go. And this goes the same. It's the same with regular brush. Building up your highlights with a paintbrush. We'll add some color underneath his arms here. Just a little bit. We don't want it completely dark. We want some of this skin tone shining through. Alright. And what's great about the Pro Acrylic paints is they dry flat. And it's really nice, so it's not too shiny. Alright. Let's go ahead and clean out our airbrush. And we're going to switch to some brush painting. It's just after 7, so I got about an hour and a half left. I changed my times to 8:30. Closing, ending at 8:30 instead of to 9:30. The 4-hour one's a bit too much for me. That way I can eat something at a decent time. It's mainly what it is. Because I start at 5:30 and that's a bit too early to eat dinner. I am considering adding right now I have my schedule Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 5:30 to 8:30, and I'm thinking of adding a weekend, like on Saturday, like during the day, like in the afternoon, like around 2 or so. So I might be doing that this weekend. We'll see how my schedule works. So I'm just rinsing out the brush. You see there's still paint in there. this out. That looks tasty. So what I'm doing here is when I pull the trigger back, the needle will go in, and I'm just holding gently the paper towel against it, so it's back flushing or backwashing from the tip back into the container, and that's where I get those bubbles. And what that's doing is pushing any paint that's in here back into the reservoir, into the cup here, that I can wipe that out. Get any dried paint that might be in there. So as long as I keep the cup inside clean and all in here, and the front part up here clean, the outside's not a big deal to me. It looks well used. That's what it is. So, using paper towel, give it a good swipe. Make sure there's no particles that'll get stuck in the needle, and just rinsing it out with my water and spraying that through into here. Spray it on my towel to see if there's any more paint coming in. Alright. Spray out the rest of the water. No, nothing coming out. We're good to go. So I'll go ahead and turn off my compressor. And we'll gently remove the needle here. You want to be very careful with the needle because it can bend, the tip can bend real easy. I still have some cleaning solution on my rag here, so I'm just taking it from the base and just gently wiping the ends, going up to the point. Never go down because you can catch that and one, poke yourself because it's very sharp, and also you can bend it. So you just want to make sure that there's no paint residue on the needle. Just there's a hole right here in the trigger down in the housing, so we want to thread the needle through that. Very gently. And that can also, if there's any paint residue in here, that could push it out. So I just want to do a quick grip it with my fingernails, make sure there's no paint on the end. And I'm done airbrushing for the night, so I'm going to pull the needle back so it's not sticking out at the end, and then lock it in. And then I just rest it right in here. And that's it. So let me go ahead and let the air out of my tank here. All right. So we'll set this stuff aside. Do a little bit of cleanup. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the regular painting. I got my wet palette here. I got our cup. So we're going to do some base coats on the rest of the area and then see and go from there within the time that I got. Does anyone have any questions on airbrushing that they want to ask before anything else? I'll just refill my coffee mug here. I'm letting the paint dry a bit. They do dry fast. Well, I'll just let it dry some more while I'm refilling my coffee mug here. Take any questions if anyone's got anything they want to talk about. If anyone's working on hobby stuff, painting miniatures or any type of hobby and want to share it, go ahead and pop that in the chat while you're listening to me ramble on. Alright, so we got our wet palette, and it's going to play havoc with my white balancing here. So I'm going to move it so it's out from underneath the camera. Thrawn True Blue, very cool name. What is that you've never done and you want to learn to do? You've never used an airbrush? What do you mean by that? Alright, so we're going to readjust here. Let's put my palette off to the side. Yes, coffee is the nectar of the gods. Yes. So. Ah, nectar of the gods. Alrighty. So, let's go ahead and add some base coats to this guy and figure out the colors. So his skin tone is a rather pinkish or brownish tone. So I think with the fur, we can do kind of like a gray tone. We'll have some reddish leathers. And his hair, I guess we can make it a dark brown. Yeah, we can do that. Because what he's got for his butt flap here, he's got some fur pelt here, and that comes around to the front, and then he's got a loincloth right there. Oh, that's okay. I'm usually airbrushing. Yeah, it's really fun. Fun to do. You can check out some of the VODs to see some other ones. But if you have any questions on airbrushing, go ahead and pop them in the chat while I'm working on this other stuff. So, to answer your question, if I stop painting, that's not a problem. I'm not using the streams to work on commissions. This is one of my own pieces. I'm just painting it up and just demonstrating airbrushing and just having fun. So feel free to ask any questions on painting. Don't feel that your question will stop me from painting. It's fine. Just go ahead and ask the question. If you feel like the question's very beginner and and I probably heard of it, ask away. Don't feel intimidated about asking a question, any type of questions. So, all right. So now, what I usually do when I'm building up base coats, I'll start with the skin. I'll start with the innermost portion of the model, where in this case it's the skin, which I did with the airbrush, because the majority of him is skin. So using the airbrush, I was able to get great coloration in a short amount of time. And now I can go back with a regular brush, and start adding color to the rest of the model. So what I do is I start usually with the innermost out. Yeah, it'll probably be rabbit fur. So I'm thinking like a pale gray. I might add some, because it's rather large, I might add some spots. But it's a big pelt. So that must be some, it looks like it's one piece, like up here and then a second piece down here. So it might be combination of rabbit. Be interesting. Because he also has it here on his wrist with a rope over it. And he's got like a leather strap here. And he's got some bits of armor. Like right here on his belly, on his shoulder. That's about it. So, yeah, like I said, I like to work from the inside out. So I'll start with the skin, and then usually do the hair. Excuse me, and like the first layer. Yeah, wolf sound I think would work better for him, because it's such a large portion of fur. I mean, you can see it as a large piece. Could be bear, for that matter too. So I work from the innermost part of the model out, because if I were to start with let's say the shoulder pad of this metal, get that all painted up, it's all where I want it, it's nice, and then I start painting the inside, like right in here, I take the chance of hitting the metal with my brush strokes, and then it's like, gotta go back and fix that. So it's easier to go from this point, fix this all up, and then go to the next raised area. No, not really. This model is actually not that expensive. He was $8 at the store. The Reaper bones from Reaper Miniatures, they're very reasonably priced. Not high on detail in most cases, but very nice. This is another one. It's the Reaper bones. It's kind of like it's interesting material. It's kind of like a PVC plastic. It's very bendable, as you can see here on the smaller ones. And this one, she's like a succubus, and she's reading. But it's very flexible, so if I were to drop it, it kind of bounces. The paint won't scrape off it. Usually models are made out of plastic, metal, pewter metal, or resin. And this is an interesting material that Reaper Miniatures has made. They're really fun to paint. This one is the same material, but it's thicker, so it's not as bendable. Yes, I have. A good friend of mine, he has a 3D printer, and he makes it. This is a 3D printed, and he do I have? No, I don't have the original. The regular size is like it's like the size of his leg. It's really tiny, but he just adjusted the size and just made it larger. But yeah, this is a 3D print. This is no, it's not pliable. I just broke it. I just snapped that. Oops. But that's okay. I was planning on taking that off anyways. Yeah, this is a 3D print out of the plastic, so you can kind of see the lines in it. I have another one over here. Maybe if I can reach it. Ah, oh well. But yeah, I've painted up 3D printed ones. They're really fun to paint too. This model here, look around. This is a Games Workshop model. It's plastic, so he's ready for some color too. This is Araman from their science fiction game, Warhammer 40,000. But yeah, the Reaper bones are really fun to paint. They're nice to practice on. They're not that expensive. Oh yeah, yeah, it's easy to paint 3D. When you apply the primer, it still takes it. Any model that I paint, whatever material, whether it's plastic, metal, resin, 3D printed, whatever, I always scrub it with dish soap, a little bit of dish soap, a old toothbrush, and warm water. I scrub it really good, let that fully dry, then I prime it, let that fully dry, and then begin the painting process. That way I've washed off any oils, whether it's from the mold or from handling. You can get the oils from your hand. I always use a paint holder. So after I clean it, yeah, metal is fun to paint. They're all paint. They all enjoy. I enjoy them all. After I've cleaned it, I will attach it to a handle, and there's different. This is a natural brand from Games Workshop, and it has spring loaded where you can adjust it to the base. But he's going to be on a separate base, so I'm painting the base separate, I should say. So this is just two-sided sticky tape added onto the handle. So I'll attach it to a handle. That way I'm not touching it, and then I'll prime it off the handle, and I'm holding the handle instead of the model. So this is just a paint cap from a rattle can. So after the primer is fully cured, I can, touch it. It won't rub off or anything. I'm just wearing this. In fact, I can take this glove off. I only wear the glove when I'm airbrushing. But now I'm not worried about if I happen to touch the model to steady it while I'm painting, that I'll rub paint off of it. Because cleaning off any of that residue before priming it and then letting the primer fully sit, which is a good 12 hours at least. It will dry within 30 minutes or an hour, depending on how big and how thick you put the primer on. Letting it fully cure, then it won't chip off. The paint won't chip off or anything. And I found no need to add any varnish at the end, but you can do that if you're going to be handling it a lot, like for gaming and things like that. Oh yeah, I mean, you can use anything for a paint handle. Paint bottle, a medicine bottle. These are wooden candlestick holders that I picked up at a hobby store. I just flipped it over. You can put blue poster tack and put the model down on it. I find the two-sided sticky tape works really well. These you can buy at from Games Workshop. They're just spring-loaded, and it's adjustable to what base. I apologize for the camera shaking at the moment. I live near a railroad track, and it's the night train going by right now, so it's kind of shaking my table. So it'll be gone within a minute. But yeah, these ones are really nice. They're not that expensive. It's like $8, and it holds up, you know, to that point, so you can have a base fit in here, and then further down. I don't have a model nearby. Oh, yeah. Here. See, this is just a base that I added some cork to make it look like rocks. So you just do this. That way now I'm not holding it. I don't take the chance of getting fingers on it. And then with the sticky tape, just press it down. Holds it really well. Doesn't come off. And then when you're done, just pop it off. Very nice. All right, so now let's add some hair to him. He's got some nice, wonderful chops here, sideburns. He's got a bit of hair up here, and the hair on his forearms, and then on his legs. And that's just all fur. So I want to kind of give him some dark hair. So I'm going to do a mixture, like about a 50-50 of coal black, which is the black, and a dark umber, it's a dark brown. So this I'm working from very dark shadows up to a highlight. I know someone asked me earlier if you can paint from dark to light. And yes, you can. You can paint from light to dark. Also, this technique of doing the zenithal, if I wanted to, I can add very thin paints, like almost watercolors, and paint over this. I already got my highlights and my shadows done from the airbrush, and then I can just start adding very thin paints onto it and tint the areas to give it color. So I would just be adding color to the already highlighted model. Yeah, the extra bits on the base is icing on the cake. Yeah, this hill troll, he didn't come with a base, and it was just this model. And how they posed him with his arm out here, he kept tipping over. It was just a lot of weight. You know, it was off balance. So I attached him to slate rock that I had. A couple pieces of slate rock. Glued them on there. And then it's attached to a base, which is right here where the tape is holding. And then I just attached it to my paint handle. And that made some look a little more intimidating, where he's kind of on the top of some rocks. So it'd be very intimidating to any adventurers. So I have my wet palette here, and basically what this is, it's a sponge with some parchment paper. Hopefully I didn't get some paint on my face. And what this is, the sponge is damp, and the moisture is coming through the palette paper. and it's keeping my paint wet that I can work with. And then when I'm done painting, or if I need to take a break and I don't want this paint to dry, I can just cover it up with the lid and then come back to it later. You can use a palette paper, and some powder on my hands. Little plastic plates will work too for palette, for a dry palette. But I like using the wet palette because I can mix my color and keep it fresh, that I can keep drawing from. I try not to have any water on the top part of the palette, of the parchment paper, but because if you have water on it, it'll add to the paint and it'll just make a big mess. So we're going to use, yeah, that's why using a wet palette is really nice. So I got some black here and I got some dark umber, and I'm going to make a mixture of the two. So I'm just going to take a little bit from my black here and make up a whole new little pool of paint. Add some umber into there, make an even darker brown. Now I'll keep drawing from that pool, and if that starts to dry, I have too much, I can always pull from, if I need to make more, I can always pull from these fresh pools of paint to mix it. Same idea as you would do on a dry palette, is just the wet palette keeps it wet, because acrylic paints, they dry pretty fast. Not too fast, but they dry within a minute or so. Or they dry about a couple minutes, give or take. So I just want to make sure that I'm not getting this color on the skin that I've already painted. Yeah, knocking them over doesn't help either. That's why I have them over to the side and making sure. But yes, that has happened. You do want to add some water to your paint to help it flow well. So I just draw. I cut the paper small enough to where I have this kind of border of the sponge, and it's, as you can see, it's still quite, it's damp, and I'll just tap my brush onto that and get some water into the brush and mix it into my paint. If I were to, and that way I can control how much water I add to the paint. If I were to dip it into my paint pot that I clean, I would just tap the surface with the brush, and the capillary action of the brush will suck up a lot of paint, and then I add that to my paint puddle or blob of paint, and it adds way too much. Taking a little bit from the sponge off the side, I can control how much water goes into my paint, and then I just drag it across my thumb here to make sure it's flowing really well. And I also twist and drag my brush to get a nice point. I was painting 10 years ago. Yeah, a lot of these extra little tips, I just, it's one of those trial and error things. Yeah, I wish when I started painting I had access to the internet. There was an internet at that time, 25 plus years ago. I learned to paint just by reading gaming magazines and the painting articles from there. Well, see, now you know. Now you have some good knowledge. I'm still learning stuff. I watch other streamers, talk to other painters, watching videos, even if it's the pure basic. Yeah. I've always worn glasses, and I have bifocals from having to see better, but to get to those really small, tiny bits, I picked up reading glasses. So sometimes you might see me having those on, so I have my glasses, my bifocals, and this. It's like the steampunk, the telescope glasses. They have a visor, a magnifying visor that it's got a headband. You put it on, and you can pull it down, and that works too. But I find the readers that you can pick up at any pharmacy or at a Walmart work really well. Also, having nice bright lighting helps. You're not straining your eyes or anything like that. He's got this little tuft of hair on top of his head. That's awesome. Yeah, he's got the texture on here. He's got goatee too. So he's got long sideburns, and then he's got a chin beard. Oh yeah. And you want to be able to see like at this view and make sure it's comfortable for you. I did get one of those visors, but the headband was too tight on it, and it was pressing on my temples, and it was giving me a headache. So I picked up the readers, and it's so much better. You can use it for wargaming. You can use it for role playing, like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or any type of game like that. Or you can just paint it up and have it on your shelf. But yeah, you can use it for wargaming. What I'm going to be doing, I'm just painting them up. Yep, no problem. I just picked it up because he's like, oh, that's a cool model. A lot of it, I'm more of a painter than anything else, a hobbyist than a gamer. And I'll look at the models, and if it's got a cool factor, I'll pick it up and I'll paint it. But yeah, he would be a nice alternative to, you know, any type of hill troll or giant or whatnot for any war game, whether it's Warhammer Fantasy, things like that. Yep, they did. They I'm trying to see if they sculpted eyebrows on him. Yes, I totally agree. He's got some really big bushy eyebrows, but we'll, we'll go ahead and apply this on here. And if I don't like it, I can always paint over it. That's what's so great about painting. You can, if you make a mistake, you can always paint over it. So he's got some really, really big eyebrows there. M5 Willia, thank you for the follow. Welcome. So we'll paint some of this hair on him. Yeah, he doesn't have any nose hair sticking out. I can add some more shadow in there anyway, so it's not a big deal. This might be too dark for that. But yeah, he's probably does have some nose hair and some ear hair. I don't think he's sitting around. He's like, oh man, I wish I had some clippers. Trim my nails. Trim my nose hairs. Yeah, he must pluck. I think he does. I think he does. Makes me wonder what he would use for the plucking. Alright. So he's got some hair on the back of his hand here. Does he have hair on his feet? Yeah, he's got hair on his feet too. Strange. It would make sense if he had some hair on his back too. Well, the other places he's got hair. And even some on his chest. He's a well-manicured giant. He probably waxes too. That's why he has no back hair or anything. Yeah, that's probably what it is. From all the plucking he does. Ew, that's nasty. So near the ends, I'm kind of tapping it, like so, to make it look like it's blending into the skin. So like just little hash marks around the edges. He's got some hairy feet and lower legs. Jeez. That's crazy. So we'll just rotate the model around to make sure we're getting all the angles. Rotate the model around. Don't hold it in one spot like this and then rotate your wrist. because you can, I'm bending my wrist to get awkward angles, and you might twist something that should not be twisted. So you want to kind of keep your wrist loose, but straight, so you're not getting those awkward angles and twisting and pulling a muscle or anything. No carpal tunnel. It's not fun. Now I'm keeping this one arm, the elbow up against my stomach. I'm not resting it on my table here. And I have the elbow of the other one resting at the other side. So I'm propping it up, and I'm using my fingers holding the base to keep it steady. Another way you can do this guy's pretty big, so we'll move to the little one, is to have your elbows on the desk or your table and propping the palm up against the handle. That's why it's really nice to have the handle, because you can lay it in the palm of your hand like so, and then prop this up against it that you can control it. So instead of having it where you're like this, where you have your wrists up against the desk, you're bent over. And so you're like this at this point, painting. You're going to get crinks on your neck and your shoulders and your back. Being at this position, your back is more straight. It's not compressed over your lungs, and you can breathe better. And you can steady your hands to do those fine details. So another good trick for you. And also have a nice comfortable chair. Works really well too, if you plan on painting for long periods of time. Alright, so we got his ankle hairs, his forearm. We missed this one. Okay. So when I first started to stream, I had the camera down pretty low. I didn't have it set up as it was, but I was like this and had the camera right here, right above me. So I was tensing up to make sure it's steady so people could see it. And automatically I was getting tense muscles in my neck and my back, and it was hard. So when I pulled up the camera higher up and started sitting like this with my elbows on the table and propping it up, keeping straight, it was much better, and I could sit there and paint for longer periods of time. And now I just got into the habit of painting this way. Glad you're liking the tunes. This is the Pretzel Rock free app or website. I had to search a bit to find some songs that weren't like techno dance club songs. They're good songs, but they're, it's like kind of nerve-wracking when you're trying to paint and talk. At least for me. Alright, now having that dark hair, that black, brown-black type color really helps separate it. And He's got some leather straps. He's got a leather tunic here that I'm going to do in the umber, or actually the mahogany tone, which is a nice red brown. Yes, I have done tattoos before. In fact, I could probably do them on here, but not tonight. We can do that for another stream. But I do have a model that I've done tattoos on. I can explain it real quick how I did it, so you don't have to wait for, till I do a stream on it. The only one I've got. All right. I got a sample piece here. All right. So this is a Dwarf Slayer from Warhammer Age of Sigmar by Games Workshop. And it's a very fun model. The stripes on his pants here was all what's called freehand. That's not molded on there. I just painted the stripes and shaded and highlighted them. He does have some tattoos on him. It's kind of small, so it's a bit hard to see, but he's got a tattoo right here. Trying to keep it in focus. He's got a tattoo right here. A little bit right there. And then one on his hand. He's got a wraparound tattoo right here. Here's a darker one here on his palm. Not his palm, the back of his hand. And then right there. And when you're doing tattoos, I also did, shaved head. Yeah, they're great models. So if I were to do a tattoo, I would highlight the skin up complete. So with him, because he's got the shading and everything, all I'm going to do is I'll probably darken the shadows and add some brighter highlights after I finished all the other stuff to see how it works well. It's kind of that teeter-totter going back and forth. But let's say he's finished, the skin tone's all done. I want to add some tattooing. So I would just get a brush with a nice fine tip, and thin out the paint. Yeah, the pinstriping, tattooing, anything like that where it's what they call freehand. It's the area is not on there and you're adding the texture to it. I always tend to do that as the last bit near the end of the process of painting. So let's say he's all finished. I did all the work on him. He's all ready to go, and I want to add some tattooing. So I would take some thin paint of the color of the tattoo I want to do. Usually it's like a blue-black tone. And I'll draw the symbol, draw what I want to do. You don't want to make it too complicated. Very simple, like circles, tribal markings. You don't want to make it too when you're first starting out, you just want to do some simple markings, like a circle with some design on it. Later on, you can go into more detail of tattooing, but it depends on what model you're working on. So if you're working on a very small model, like him, this guy, I didn't want it to be too much. And it's also a very small area, compared to this big guy. Yeah, simple tribal stuff is very easy to do. So you a lot of it is like circles, triangles, squares, simple object shapes. So you would just paint that on, and you can just highlight and shade it how you want. It's very simple. And then at the end of it, once you have the design on there, go back to your like the last highlight color of the skin, thin that down really well where it looks like a watercolor, or it's like dirty water, in the sense it's got more water than paint. It's got a very, just a slight tint of your bright highlight, and that would be a glaze. And you would just kind of gently put that over the tattoo. So what that would do, it would have a layer of skin over the tattoo, the pattern, so it looks like it's under the skin. Hopefully that made sense. But yeah, tattooing can be really fun, especially if you do simple designs to get the hang of it. Then you can go crazy, and like on his back, if it was more flat, you know, you could do a whole back pattern on it. Yeah, that last bit, adding a very thin layer of paint of the skin tone, not the base skin tone, your last highlight, just a very thin painting over it. Don't go over it too much, you know, put a layer over it, make sure you cover it, and then walk away, let it dry, because if you keep working the area as it's drying, because it's so thin, it will dry very fast. So if you keep working at it, you're actually going to pull up that layer of paint that you just applied, and you'll have an uneven finish. It'll look like bathtub stain or coffee stain look. So let's say, or water stain, if you have a cup of water on a table and you pick it up without a coaster and you pick it up, you'll have that rim of water where it's darker on the rim, but on the inside there's no water. So it's that bathtub ring, coffee stain ring thing like that. And that's the same when you're applying highlights and applying layers. Don't want to overwork the area. So you want to apply your layer of highlight and then stop, move to a different area. Because if you keep working that same area, you know, as you can see with the brush, how I'm moving it, it's almost like it will scrape the paint off that as it's dried. It will dry fast, so if I were working this whole arm, I would do this area, come up here, then work this area, and by the time I'm finished with the other side of the arm, this is fully dry. I can go ahead and add another highlight or another layer. Alright, so next layer of stuff we're going to add for base coats. We're going to do that, actually I'm going to get in here and I'm going to paint the leather all the same. Actually, and I can do the same color on all of it, keep it all concise. And that'll be this dark umber color, because I have it on my palette already. And this is the base coat for all my leathers. I'm still going to use this color on the fur, even though I'm going to paint up to gray. I want to have that brown in the dark recesses in the shading, because it's not going to be a clean gray. It's going to be a dirty gray. Going in here and being very neat, making sure I don't get any of this color on my skin tone. But if I do, I can just go back and clean it up with the brush, because I'm going to be adding more color to that. And if you're quick enough, you can use your finger to wipe off, or take another brush, slightly damp, and just wipe it off. The paint does dry fast, but it's, you know, it's got a little bit more working time. It stays wet a little bit longer than normal. And you can tell that it's still wet when it's kind of got that sheen, kind of glossy sheen. So I'm just doing very small, right in here, just small movements with my fingers. These paints cover really well for base coats. I don't really need to go over it a second time. And all I did is add just a little bit of water that was damp in my brush from cleaning it. Alright, so we got this strap here. Oh, no problem. No problem. That's the main reason for these streams, is just to, and hang out and chat and answer any people's questions. So feel free to ask any questions related to miniature painting, things like that, and hobby stuff. You know what? I think I will do some. We'll do some tattooing on this guy. That'll be cool. Some nice tribal tattoos on him. That'll break up the skin tone a bit. He's got some scar tissue on here too, some big scars, so we'll show some bruising on the skin. Do that with washes and glazes. So I'm pushing and dragging the paint up into the recesses here, underneath, because that's where I want the majority of this color to be. So when you're painting and you lift up your brush, that's where the pigment will be left behind. The most pigment, most color will be left behind, because as you drag your brush, it applies pressure, and then at the end of the stroke, as you pull it up, because as you're applying the paint, the bristles spread out, and that's depositing the paint, and then when you lift up, it comes back together. So at the end of your brush stroke, that will be where the majority of the paint will be left behind. So if I was applying highlights, I would be dragging my brush, and I want it to be brighter at this point. I would be dragging the brush up. I'll be pulling the paint or pushing the paint up to that point, and then when I pull up, that's where the majority of the paint will be. So if I was doing the shadows, I'd do the opposite way, pulling it down into the recesses. Right now I'm just doing base coats, and I just want to make sure that it's covering. So I'm going back and forth. And starting with a darker color and building up to your lighter color, that's, you know, starting from shadow to light works really well because you can a nice progression of your colors. You get some really nice blending, things like that. But like I said, there's no right or wrong way, because like his skin tone, I did the base coat and then shaded it down and then highlighted it up. So I started at the mid-tone, went down, and then went up, back up. Here I'm applying a dark color and building it up. I could do that where I could apply the base coat and do a shade or a wash. You know, these very thin, heavily pigmented colors, it's very watered down. Put that over and that'll go into all the recessed areas. Yes, painting the fur. We're painting with the dark umber color first because this is going to be very like gray to bright white in certain areas. Not to the white, but bright gray in certain areas. But I'm starting with a dark undertone. And the same with the leather. I'm keeping it all that dark brown. And he also has some ropes on him. Alright, Crikeus. Have a good one. Thank you for stopping by. See you soon. Have a good sleep. Good night. Sweet dreams. Yeah, fur hair is very fun to highlight. So we'll get the base coats down on him for tonight, and then tomorrow night we'll work on the highlights. So we'll continue with this guy tomorrow night. And what I might do before the stream tomorrow is go ahead and base coat the log and the metal prior to the stream, so you don't have to see me painting those up. Rat odors, yeah, very cool. Yeah, you can use the same paint scheme for rat odor too. Those are some really cool looking models too. I played Skaven, an original Warhammer Fantasy. Very fun. So unpredictable. I haven't had a chance to play him in the new Age of Sigmar yet. Actually, no, I take that back. I did when it first came out. I was playing Skaven. Actually, you know what? I'll probably just go ahead and paint those on there anyways. Yeah, because all I got left is this and that. Yeah, Mordheim. Oh, Mordheim was awesome. That was I love that game. That was really fun. It's the one war game that my wife really liked when we first got married, is when Mordheim was really popular. And I was working at Games Workshop at the time, and she really liked that game. She liked the Sisters of Sigmar. The nuns, the fighter nuns. So I picked up that set for her, and she painted them herself, and so she had a blast with those. Hopefully they'll come out with an updated version. I know it's still played. There is a group, a Mordheim group here in Minnesota that gets together. I have yet to get a chance to go play. It's just they're always getting together when I'm unable to play. So. All right. We're gonna go ahead and paint the tree trunk here. We're gonna do it a light umber. So I think I want to make that kind of a dead tree too. So we'll have some gray in that, green, things like that, and that'll offset some of this red leather. Yeah, for Mordheim, I had a Skaven warband, and I had an undead warband for those. I really liked that. I liked the mercenaries because they were kind of like pirates. So I really liked them. They were fun. It was a fun game to play. She had the nuns, the sisters, and start picking up some of the Amazons. Those were a pain to put together. Casper army. No, with my undead army, it was werewolves, like the dire wolves. I converted them to look like werewolves. I didn't have any zombies. I had a few skeleton warriors, but it was vampires, werewolves, you know, and some other monsters. So it was different. It was a different setup than your typical undead army. I like the undead army. That was my first army in fantasy. All right. So now we're going to use this light umber. And actually I'm going to switch to a bigger brush. I was using the smaller brush because of small detail, but I'm going to switch to a bigger brush here. As all I have to be careful about is around his hands. Yeah, dwarves are cool. All right, add some more of that. My palette. Yeah, I like the dwarves. I like the dwarves from the old game. The newer ones are really cool. I like the steampunk pirate ones. I do like those for Age of Sigmar. And a lot of those I would just want to pick up just to paint. 10 more minutes. So yeah, we'll get all the base coats on here. I'll do the armor. Awkward angle. All right. So for the metal, I want it kind of dark. Pro Trill hasn't come out with a dark metal yet. Soon. In the next couple months in the next batch, they'll have a very dark metal. But to make up, I'm just going to mix it with some coal black. Oh, I got black on my palette still. And I'm going to add a little bit of the brown in there. So here's my silver. So we'll add some of this black-brown mix that I had for the hair. And I kind of want it a little bit darker. There we go. So that's a nice muted dark silver. Now the silver is not, the metal is not going to be bright and shiny, because I highly doubt that this guy, he paints it up, he keeps it nice and shiny. So we will add some weathering and some rust to it at the end. I'll paint it, just like with the skin for tattooing or for weathering on metal bits, I'll paint it up to look nice, and then I'll add the weathering and chipping and things like that. I might add some gold or whatnot on some other areas. Yeah, they don't polish their their armor, but we're going to make it look nice and pretty first before we dirty it up. So just slapping on the base coat here to get all the colors in there, to figure out if I like the color scheme for that moment, because I know this will be lighter, and here on the rope that'll be a different color. Oh, I missed a spot. This will be a little bit lighter compared to this, because this is the outer bark, and I want that to look kind of a greenish gray, like it's decayed. So now that I got the rest of the model covered, base coated, I can see where my color palette is. Gives me more of an idea. usually I have kind of an idea of how I want it to look in my head, and as I'm starting to apply paint. But sometimes I don't know, and I just like, okay, let's try this color, and see where it goes. See where the paint takes me. And after I do that, it's like, you know what, I don't like the look of that. I can go back and change it up. But this gives me an idea, overall feeling of how the model will look when he's finished. So in some cases, I will do an all, have it all completed to a point, and then go in and add flavor, like highlights and shading and things like that, instead of taking one area, going from start to finish, and then going to the next area start to finish. Sometimes I'll do that, but most cases I'll do it just like this. So I got the majority of it done with the airbrush on the skin to where I'm liking it, where I got some good definition of the muscles from shading to highlighting. And then I got the base coats on the rest of the model. So a little bit right there is still a bit wet. Recessed in there. There we go. Alright. So at this point, he's good enough to go bring him to the table and play some games. I'm happy with that. I can put him on the table and I'll be happy with that as I'm doing in the process. And then come back and add more highlights and things like that as I'm working through them. So if you are just wanting to get this model painted on the table to play, the next day or in a couple days or the weekend coming up, this is perfect. If you do not have you don't want to use all the technique with the airbrush, technique with the airbrush of shading, you can just do all base coats and have it just colored. It's much better than having it plain. So it's a work in progress, but he's looking good. I'm happy with the way he looks, and I'm excited. I've painted this guy a few times. Painted it like once or twice, didn't like how it was looking, then came back to it. Put it aside. It's like, I don't want to look at it anymore. And I've come back and tried other things. But I'm liking the way he's looking right now. And I'm excited to finish him up to the point where I would be happy to put that out. So, all right, so we're about 8:30 now, and that's my cutoff point for now for today. So we'll cover up the wet palette. I want to thank everyone who came in and hung out with me and chatting away, asking the questions. I love to answer questions and have some fun. And to all the new people who came in, started following and subscribing, thank you. I appreciate it. Welcome to the team. Not to the team. Welcome to my group, the fam. But if you haven't already and you'd like to keep up to date of when I'm streaming nets, go ahead and click on that follow button down below. And I stream Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 5:30 to 8:30 Central Standard Time. I'm thinking of adding a weekend, like afternoon, probably on Saturday. So we'll see if that comes up. So thank you once again. You guys and gals have been wonderful. I had a great time, and I will see you I'll see you tomorrow night, hopefully. So thank you. Good night. Bye now.